Going on? Welcome aboard to another episode of the PG podcast. So today's episode, we got my man Ryan again, Sapstead, big coach in the UK, and we're back for another episode, another roundtable, just chopping it up, having a good time, and going over some important topics. So the theme of today's episode is we're not talking about anything else besides nutrition. It's really important because I feel like a lot of people talk so much about the training, and I think training is very important. And truth be told, a lot of individuals who watch YouTube Fitness, they watch a lot of training videos. And I feel like if you're trying to get the most muscular development possible, a lot of like the videos you're missing, that you're not watching, is like the full day of eating. Once I really started watching more full day of eating of like, lifters I really respect, whether enhanced or not, but especially like more on the natural side, especially, it really started opening a lot more doors to me, and I really started to understand what more other factors go into the whole process. If you really want to be dedicated to the process, it's not just having fun in the gym, because the gym could be fun, but then it's like when it comes down to really getting the meals down, especially if you don't have a huge appetite, this stuff tends to be a bit more annoying, but it still has to get done nonetheless. Like, I don't like cooking more than anybody else. I actually don't even like it at all, but I know it's part of the process, get it done. And I know a lot of people are in a similar boat. So I brought Ryan on board. We got tons of questions we're going to go over, and we're just going to hammer it out, man. So how you feeling today?
Yeah, good, brother. Yeah, it's nice to be back on again. I think after last time's conversation, it was we had some good feedback. So I'm looking forward to getting to more the nutrition side. And yeah, let's get to it, man.
Yep. So oftentimes I've heard this expression, it's 80-20, man. It's 80% of it's nutrition, 20%. I always call BS on that, because it's like, first of all, I've seen people who eat very well who don't look jacked at all, right? Yeah. They might be at a good body fat percentage, but at the same time, if you're training like, right before the Q&A, I just thought, if you want to look like a monster, but you're eating like a bird, or you're eating like a pig, both aren't going to work. The bird's eating crumbs, there's no appetite, and the pig just eating, like, I call them like junk food bodybuilders, where they'll go to the gym, and right on the way back home, they're at the drive-thru at like Mickey D's, and like, that's not the way either. You want to be, it has to be, most of it like minimally processed foods. And I like to say 100% nutrition, 100% training, 100% lifestyle factors, stress management, rest, all that type of stuff. It's like you're planting a garden, you want everything to be planted in the right places, and it's a big pet peeve of mine. But at the same time, people like to put numbers on it, like 80-20. I think it's all very important, man. So let's dive into like your nutrition first of all. Like, give us like a quick rundown, and this is like a blitz Q&A, by the way, of what's your current nutrition like? Because from the last episode, people, for sure, they checked out your IG. They could clearly see your physique, clearly see how much muscular development you have. But give us, like, for example, basics as far as what phase you're in. Are you bulking? Are you cutting? Or are you doing something in the middle, or you're like more into maintenance? How many meals you're eating per day? And what's your total protein intake like right now?
Okay, cool. So at the moment, I'm kind of off the back end. I kind of had a bit of a holiday for my 30th, and I wanted to be in decent shape when we were kind of training at Muscle Beach and all of that kind of shit. So I kind of went through a recon phase, and for me, that tidy up was really, really productive. Strength, if anything, got better. Overall performance, the way that I was improving on all my lifts got better, just based on the fact that I was fueling a race car on racing fuel. I wasn't fueling a racing car on diesel, if that makes sense. And I think that's one thing to just tap into a little bit, is that, like you said, a lot of people out there are just, they'll train, they'll go to the drive-through, they'll kind of hit that, and they'll go and hit McDonald's afterwards, or whatever their favorite fast food chain is. And, it's the fact that calories are king, but that's taken into a whole new level. It's almost taken into an unnecessary level. So, I find the cleaner the foods that I consume, obviously the better that I'm going to perform, but equally so, I'm a very flexible dieter. I mean, I go through phases where I'm going through a phase at the moment where I'm just trying to add a little bit of mass. So I'm kind of sitting at about 3,500 calories a day, slightly above what my maintenance would be at about 3,200 from what I can kind of calculate at the moment, based on weighing in quite often and stuff like that. So, 3,500 calories, quite a bit of that is protein. However, generally speaking, I lean towards a slightly higher protein intake than your average person. So, even though you could say from a research standpoint, if you're kind of going on more of a a mass gaining phase, you don't need your protein to be quite as high as obviously if you're in a deficit. But I tend to lean towards about probably a little bit over 1 gram per pound of body weight, as it were, maybe
Right.
1.2 at a push, dependent on the kind of day. So, unfortunately, it's kind of got to that point where I rely upon an extra protein shake every day, as opposed to getting everything through meat and, all my kind of normal food sources. But it's not as much as it would be as the protein would be as if I'm in a deficit. But yeah, generally speaking, like, diet's going well. I eat 3 meals a day plus snacks. I'm a very snacky person. That's just the way that my lifestyle allows it. So generally speaking, 3 pretty large meals a day. I would say probably around between 700 and 900 calories each. And then the rest is just kind of filled throughout the day with snacks. I tend to have quite a I don't know how it is over in Canada, but I'm kind of like in the UK, where a lot of us are kind of molded when we grow up. We've got this whole, like, you have your dinner and then you have your dessert. And it's always a thing. So I'll always have a pretty big dessert after dinner. I always like to make room for that in my calories without kind of overshooting or any of that. So dessert almost ends up being an extra meal. So you could say 4 larger meals with snacks, but it works out pretty well. I mean, digestion's fine and things like that, and training's going really productively, and I'm not gaining, I'm not overshooting and gaining too much mass, which is the main concern, especially because in the past I've had a lot of experiences with, competing and getting towards a competition prep, and I've got too much weight to lose in too little time, basically. So things are productive at the moment, probably the most productive they would be, I would say.
No, it's really good to hear, man. But you raised an important point with the protein, and that brings me on to my next point. You hear so many different arguments about it, and that's why people hire a coach, because there's just so much information online, and they just don't even know what to believe at this point. And there's so many studies that contradict other studies, and we don't even know how credible some of these studies even are. And some of these studies aren't even, truth be told, aren't even for lifters either. So it's like, or they're for like the pure novice, not someone who's been lifting for a long time. But anyways, there's so many factors to come into play when you address like certain studies. But you're another example of someone, who's in a surplus, who's getting slightly over 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that's basically what I've been talking about for a long time. If you want to cut down, get the protein a bit higher, you want to try to reserve as much muscle as possible. But obviously, like, if you're trying to get 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight and you're bulking up, it's a lot, for a lot of people. Some people still do it. But what I tend to see is like 1 to like 1.5 tends to be like the little range. But what's your argument for people who say that it's all a scam, it's BS, because this is protein powder supplement companies trying to sell more and make more money off of lifters, because it's a $1 billion industry, and they're basically citing certain studies to basically just pimp out their supplements. What's your thoughts on that?
It's a tough one, because as we know by now, a lot of studies are funded by different industries, depending on what the study is. There can be biases, there can be kind of, there can be studies that were done that were completely unbiased, and it's hard to kind of pick apart a lot of that information. But, what I can say is that protein intake is, it should be a range. It should not be, you can look at the research and say, okay, well, people should have X amount per kilo or pound of body weight, let's say. But one thing that I find is the most important thing is that you should listen to your body with regards to how it's digesting that protein. Can you handle that much? What is best for you? We can use ranges to dictate where we should actually put people and put our clients and have ourselves. But I think it's important to, and I say it a lot with pretty much everything, and research is to be taken with a pinch of salt. You've got to take that knowledge and then, open your mind up to that knowledge, but equally so, you've got to be careful with the application and how you do it, because none of us can really confirm whether these are things that are made up by industry giants, and these are it's ultimately we've got a point at the research where it's as unbiased as possible, but we've got to almost use that and take it with a pinch of salt, apply it to ourselves, apply it to our clients, and then just find what works. We can taper it here and there. If something says you should have, you should be at 1 gram per pound of body weight when it comes to being at a deficit or being at your maintenance or whatever, I think we should just kind of take things as a range instead. I have clients that are, and over here we kind of generally use gram per kilo as opposed to gram per pound. So it's, metric imperial. But I've got clients that when they're in a deficit, they're absolutely fine, and they struggle to get their protein in when it comes to being, 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight, which doesn't actually kind of seem too much. I mean, if you think 2.2 grams per kilo, well, 2.2 kilos is obviously 1 pound. 2.2 pounds, is 1 kilo. So if you think 1 pound per 1 gram per pound of body weight is going to be, I've completely got that wrong. So 1 gram per pound is going to be 2.2 grams per kilo. I've got clients that are having 2.2 grams per kilo and they're struggling to hit that protein target. I've got other clients where it suits their lifestyle to have 2.4, 2.6 grams per kilo when they're in deficits. I've got other clients that struggle to get 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight. It's dependent on the individual's lifestyle as well. I think the main thing with that is that you've got to just take things with a pinch of salt and apply them yourself to be able to find what works for people, because it's not necessarily what works with regards to how much muscle mass that they're gaining or how much strength they're gaining, whatever. A lot of it's to do with digestion. Can they digest it first and foremost? If they can, are they seeing the benefit from it? If they can digest it and they can increase, then fine. If they don't physically have the appetite and the capacity to increase, then it's not worth it. You need to kind of stay a little bit lower. But I think there's a threshold you can stay between that you can safely know that there will be a result from it. But you've got to kind of find that threshold, and you've got to be within that threshold, as opposed to, okay, 2 grams per kilo of body weight's not working, we'll try 2.2. It's too accurate. You just need to have a window. I think it's the same with calories. You just need to have a window as opposed to being on the money, because the research will never point towards an exact number. It will always point towards a range.
Right. You tend to see certain patterns, of what works and what doesn't. And I find people when their protein is just lower, like when it's under like a gram, it's not the same, And there's always that thought in the back of your head that like maybe it would be better, like might as well just be there,
Oh yeah. And I mean, like we could talk from.
It's not even hard to get that either for most people.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we could talk from a bodybuilding standpoint. I know, like when you get to a certain body fat percentage, and the muscle starts to shine through, you kind of feel a little bit leaner and stuff like that. If you are on, let's say, the difference between 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight and or let's talk in pounds. So the difference between 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein and 1.3, 1.4 grams per pound of body weight in protein, that will reflect on your physique 100%. With you as an individual, you will notice that you will feel harder on that slight increase, but it will also give you a substantially harder look. And that's what I've found with myself, with my clients. But that's not to say, and that's very bro sciencey, and that's not to say that there is any research that backs that, but that's something that you notice as a coach, that you can achieve a harder look with an increase in protein. You could go into detail about the thermic effect of food. Protein is obviously going to take more to digest and is going to burn more calories per gram of protein than digesting a gram of carbs, and so on and so forth. But you can go into TEF all day long, but ultimately the result that comes from it, a higher protein intake will almost always lead to a better physique and a better result than a lower protein intake.
Yeah, big time. Let's transition, while we're on this topic, to bulking, man. For some circles, it's a controversial topic. right? But I've been, as long as I've been on this channel, I've always preached bulking. I think it's very important. And by bulking, I mean clean bulking. I'm not talking like being a junk food bodybuilder, going to drive-throughs after sessions, like just to fill up the calories. And just to be on the same page, like, yes, I'm aware from one of my last episodes, like when I was 232, some of that was coming from like, it was not just broccoli and rice and like chicken to get to 230, it was like some pecan pie, stuff like that to fill up the gap somehow, which obviously helps you in more of a surplus, But anyways, with that being said, just like how in last episode, and some of this is bro science too, but you go by real world experience as well. But just like how last episode I was saying that the widest and the thickest guys I know and gals, they tend to do barbell rows. The people I know, naturals, who are the biggest, have had a lot of bulks. And no, not these shallow bulks where they're like, okay, if we're talking about Gen Pop, we're not talking about like people who go on stage, but like I know in as far as people who are on stage though, some of these guys talk about how they're 50 pounds over their stage weight in the off season, Some even higher than that, and they say that's when they have like their best pushes, they put on the most amount of muscle, and then they slowly start to taper down as competition comes. And some coaches, when they see that, for example, the lifter who wants to compete does not have as much muscle, doesn't have the package, some coach will even tell the guy, look, or the gal, you're not going to compete this year, man. You're going to be in off season for like 2 years. You just don't have what it takes. Even if you bulk up this year, it's just not enough. 2 years. Some probably even tell them 3 for anything, but like that in itself should already say something, because there's not many options, man. Like you could cut, but what are you trying to chisel a pebble? Like you're some people, they just want to be lean all the time, they want the skull face, they want the abs, but it's like you don't have anything yet. And it's like if you maintain, aka gaintaining, like they say on YouTube, it's slow too, man. How are you gonna? I always say, if your arm is 12 inches, how are you gonna get it to 14 and then eventually 16 inches by maintaining weight?
Yeah. So if your calories are at maintenance, what extra are you getting in? What's gonna do the building if you're just taking in enough to maintain? There might be a little bit of recomp here and there. Depends if you clean things up a little bit. Might be a little bit of recomposition. Might be a little bit of tissue gain, but not visible. It's not going to grow you a substantial amount. I think that's the issue. And with a lot of guys I know, and again, it's like we spoke about. There are always two extremes. You get the guys that are like, okay, we want minimal fat gain, and we're gonna gaintain. And then you get the guys at the opposite side of the spectrum that are like not quite dirty bulk, but they're adamant that they've got to gain 40, 50 pounds, between in their off season. If they're in an off season for like 2-3 years, they've got to gain 50 pounds and they've got to be substantially heavier, and they've got to have a substantial amount of increase of calories. But I mean, and exactly like the same with the training element. It's the same that we spoke about the optimal crowd and the suboptimal crowd, whatever. But it's almost, you have to be somewhere in the middle. The main indicators when it comes to your training is your performance remaining high? You may find that you get to a certain weight where it's actually uncomfortable to perform. You may find you have digestive stress. You may find you lose your appetite. You have to keep an eye on these markers. So in reality, my kind of thoughts on the whole bulking process is you can be as extreme as you want, but as an individual, you'll come to a time where you have gained so much fat mass, or you're getting so much food in, that you've got a lot of digestive stress, of which you would then need to dial back, maybe look at a little bit of a diet break or like a mini cut, whatever, just to bring that hunger back, because again, that's one of the first things to go. But also, you may find you get to a point where certain lifts are just hitting a plateau because your performance is not as high as, I always think that there's a sweet spot with regards to a maintainable level of body fat while being in a surplus. And I'm not talking sub 12%, but I'm also starting to kind of realize, and especially with some of my clients and myself, that when I get past 18, 20% body fat, my performance starts to flag quite a lot, and my energy levels aren't as clean, and they're not as instant, and they're not the same as when I'm 15, 16% body fat. And again, that's a very individual approach, and you need to find where that's, again, it's a threshold. So you need to find that threshold for each individual where they perform the best. They're able to consistently increase their calories over time, and this could be every 3-4 weeks we're adding a little bit extra just to kind of keep you at that point. And the main thing is that you're not overshooting your weight gain. In reality, if you're gaining more than, I believe it's around 1% of your body weight per 1 to 2% of your body weight per month, the likeliness is, as a natural, that's not going to be muscle. That the majority of that is going to be fat. And if you're overshooting, unless you're post show and you've got to allow a little bit of fat gain, you might gain 15 pounds within the first week post show. That's just how it is. Your body wants that fat. It needs to kind of draw it back in. But anything after that, if you're kind of in a mass gaining phase and you're gaining more than that amount every month, if it's a couple of kilos, if you're gaining a kilo a week, that's not ideal. You're not going to put yourself in a great situation. You think you're gaining muscle, you may gain a bit of strength relative to not necessarily relative to your body weight, but you may be gaining a bit of strength based on the fact that mechanically you've got a bit more fat around your midsection. That might help you come up in a squat. You've got a little bit of fat around your thighs. That's going to help you when it comes to deadlifts, squats, and so on and so forth. So mechanically, you may get stronger. It doesn't mean you're gaining any lean tissue. That comes after. You may feel like you're getting stronger every week, but in reality, the amount of lean tissue gained is not, the majority of that strength is not accurate, if that makes sense. So I think the main thing is you've just got to find that threshold where you perform the best and kind of almost try and gain an appropriate amount of total body weight gradually over time from there. I see guys that gain 20, 30 pounds within the space of a couple of months, and it reflects on their physique. They don't look great, which obviously is not the goal. Who cares? Whatever. But their performance isn't going up as well as it could if they were a little bit more meticulous with their nutrition. They're a little bit too careless, because the goal is we want a dirty bulk. We want to gain as much weight as possible. And I think it's just, you've just got to keep it under control and don't let it get out of hand. And that's what a lot of people tend to do.
No, it's because you are what you eat, to a certain extent. And if you're eating food that's not going to help with your performance, like for example, if you eat like sweet potatoes, man, if I eat sweet potatoes, tons of energy. That energy is going to transfer over to better sessions, more output in the gym, better recovery, all these factors that are going to play into my favor. And I like what you said about like everybody has a personal profile, like a point with body fat where they feel the best. And if maybe you have a coach who's doing this with you, or maybe you just have your own personal journal, you have like little check boxes, okay, how's my energies levels for the day? If my energy levels drop, when does that happen? How's my sex drive? You look at all these factors, and week after week, you're just monitoring it,
Yeah.
And if you notice, for example, that, oh, well, I can speak for myself, right? Like, I tend to feel like this is not even negotiable for me. Like, the high teens, that's where I feel best. 100%. I agree with you. Once I start passing, like, once you get high in the low 20s, like, I could probably do 21, but like 25, like, nah, that's not it, man. Like,
yeah.
But like, I would say, like, if I'm like 17, 18%, a real 17, 18, I think I'm at the top of my game, But at the same time, I know guys who are like, they feel like they're at the top of their game at like 13. But then again, some of those guys, they've never actually been up to like close to 20, so they can never even know anyways. So 100. I feel like you have to go around the block a couple times to really figure out where do I perform best. But I find it very funny because I have some people contacting me, whether it's like people in my entourage or just DMs, whatever the case is, but more people who are close to me who say, man, like, and I'm not even 30 years old yet, right? So I have some people who are like, they're telling me how like they're 29 years old and they just feel like, the energy is just not there. I'm like, man, you're supposed to be at the top of your game, and like I would say, for example, as a man, I can't speak for everybody, but from what I'm observing, it seems like the sweet spot, man, where it's like you're peaked out is like 34, 35. Like that's when you have like a lot of gym experience. You've made all the mistakes in your 20s. Your nutrition's most likely pretty dialed in by that point. Had a good 15 years to mess it up, and now it's like you have good training age, but not too much, you know? And you're telling me that you're 29 years old or you're 30 years old and you're just tired all the time and you have no kids, no, like none of these extra stresses, you know? Not say,
Yeah.
you know, whatever, but so it's because the nutrition's off and like they haven't found that sweet spot, the sweet body fat spot.
Yeah. And it's
You know what I'm
because they've not spent the time trying to find it. And don't get me wrong, it sounds really overcomplicated from what we're kind of saying, and it's, you know, writing things down, but all it can be as simple as just looking at markers. Okay, if you keep in mind not even necessarily the body fat, the body fat percentage that you are at, but the weight that you're at. Okay, just kind of write some things down, or even make some mental notes of, okay, how's my sleep, how is my performance in the gym, is my strength increasing, how is my digestion, things like that. And then again, yeah, fatigue, recovery, and so on and so forth. But all it takes is just to consider those factors, because a lot of people will go, oh, fuck, I'm really tired this week. But they won't think about why. They will just blame everything else but their nutrition. And it's the low-hanging fruit in that situation, is that ultimately the first thing to do is, and it sounds really bad, I do it with everyone. It's like, first thing we say is like, are you hydrated enough? Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. Well, what's been happening with regards to nutrition? Everyone goes straight to the, I'm stressed out from work. And it's like, yeah, that can be a factor, but ultimately you're stressed out from work, which means you're likely to end up snacking or putting things into your body that are going to give you not so clean forms of energy, which are then going to reflect on everything else. And it's a vicious cycle when it comes to your sleep, stress, diet, hydration, everything. It all merges into one big cycle, because, you know, the likeliness is, if you, let's say you get home, you've had a stressful day at work, regardless of whether your training session's been good or bad. You go to work, let's say you train in the morning, you go to work, you've had a full day at work. From that full day of work, it's been super stressful. You go home, you either eat or you grab a beer, whatever you want to do. Your alcohol content comes into play, or you put some pretty bad food in your system that's either super high in sodium, or, you know, it's just kind of junk food and it's got a lot of additives, whatever. That's then going to reflect on the way that you sleep, which is then going to reflect on the way that you recover. In the morning, you're going to wake up feeling like shit. Then you've got to go and train again. And it turns into that cycle, and people don't really know. And sometimes it could be as simple as the fact that you're just having a couple too many beers in the evening, and you don't know why your training's bad. And it's because you're going to bed and you're dehydrated, and you're going to sleep like shit. You're going to wake up dehydrated, and then you're going to take a pre-workout that's full of caffeine. Then you're going to train. It might feel half decent to train, but then you're going to crash, and then work becomes stressful. And that whole cycle starts again and again and again. And it all comes down to what you're putting in your body in the first place.
Yeah, I've seen it happen tons of times. And even to take that cycle further, people, they'll have a crappy session, or let's say they'll be late to a session, or they have to rush a session, they can only do half of it. And they'll be like, oh, I can only do half of it. But they never think to themselves, what led to this happening? And like what you said, maybe the girlfriend like argument, or the extra stresses. Like there's tons of different factors that come to, maybe they slept 5-6 hours, you rush to the gym, but then what happens from there? You have a crappy session, and now that's gonna haunt you for the rest of the day, because you're like, man, I don't feel like I'm on my A game, you know?
Yeah.
At this crappy session, I'm building less muscle. Next thing you know, you're probably gonna try to go do the same session tomorrow in the gym again. It's not gonna go well because you already exerted force from the last session, and now it's like you're behind on your schedule. And now it's like you have to. Now it's like the last training session of your day is like on a Sunday, but then you have to train on the Monday. You know what I'm saying? So people have lack structure, and I feel like that comes from people just putting too much into their days.
Yeah.
And then they try to bite more than they could chew, like the expression says. I was gonna mention something important. Yeah, regarding like the not to plug in my coaching, right? But basically especially with the online people, where I'm trying to collect extra data, got the training plan, got the nutrition plan, got the weekly check-in. With the weekly check-in, you basically have certain boxes you have to check off, and some of it literally takes you like not even more than 5 minutes. You know, take the video of the physique, front, back, side, do it with flexing, send it over on the WhatsApp. You don't even have to look at it. And as far as like the questions are concerned, you could literally just write a number out of 10. Digestion, yeah, it's 10 out of 10.
Yes.
Sleep, yeah, it's this. Anyways, for people who are extra serious, there's actually a daily log where you could write like what time you went to bed at. People say, for example, my sleep is no good, and like they're like, yeah, I sleep 8 hours, but it's like if you actually log your sleep, like you write down exactly what time you're going to bed at without your phone, and then you write down, for example, what time you wake up at, you'd be really surprised to see how most people are sleeping 6 hours.
Yeah.
And that, anyways, what I'm trying to say, I know I'm kind of getting carried away, is that people, they want to do the training plan. Some people want to do the nutrition if we're lucky. But then when it comes to a weekly log, that takes you literally 5 minutes to write down your week.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
But it's like, buddy, not buddy, but this is about you, you know? I'm trying to help you transform your physique, and this only has to do with you. But then some people, they'll be so, there's so much friction and they're so hesitant to do it, but they'll gladly go on socials and spend like half an hour looking at their favorite influencer's page.
Yeah.
What's he wearing? Like, what's all these factors that don't even matter or whatever. But that influencer doesn't care about you. Whereas like a weekly check-in, this is 100% for you. You know, I know I sound repetitive, but like people have to start monitoring this stuff a bit better.
Yeah. And they need that
everything's going to
accountability,
transform from there.
That's it for sure. And I think it's one thing that I kind of notice. Yeah, I get all my clients to track their nutrition, and whether it's via MyFitnessPal, MacroFactor, whatever they want to use, as long as they're tracking their nutrition, all I say is like, look, it takes 5 minutes. If you track your day, even if it's tracking the next day, you don't have to meal prep for the whole week or anything like that. If you want to, then awesome, fucking best case scenario. But even if you can spend 5 minutes the night before tracking what you're going to have the next day, it keeps you accountable because you know what you're going to have the next day. And it's things like that. You'll find if people, it's the whole, you know, fail to prepare to fail. It's at the end of the day, if you're not willing to take a couple of minutes at the end of your day when you are sat on the sofa scrolling Instagram, you know, kind of just watching shitty reels and memes and stuff like that, literally take 2 minutes. Just go, okay, what am I going to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner tomorrow? Don't think about your snacks. Think about breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Plan it out roughly. It might already be prepared, but you know, or you might have to pick up the ingredients, whatever. But if you have that kind of small level of logging what you're eating ready for the next day, you're more likely to stay on plan. I mean, statistically, you're probably something like 80 or 90% more likely to stay on plan if you track the day before. You know, I'm just talking out my ass with that. I can't really, you know, come up with an actual statistic, but that's just the way it is. If you've got that written down, writing things down gives you another level of accountability. And it's like you said, checking in on a weekly basis, whether it's even with yourself or a coach, it's great, but it's being in control of those variables. And that's the main thing, is that the more variables you're in control of, and I don't get all my clients to track, you know, ideally I'm like, it's great if we can track your steps, if we can track your nutrition, amazing. Training's the easy one, that's the no-brainer because that's the main thing that we're tracking. But anything outside of that, the more variables that you're in control of, the more in control of your own progress you are. And that's just the way it is.
And the reason I'm laughing, man, is I think some people don't want to control the variables because they know they're crap.
Oh yeah, 100%.
They know the variables are no. They know they didn't sleep well. They know the training was not ideal at all. They know everything's pretty much crap. So like, I don't even want to see it. I don't even want to go to the bathroom where no one's looking and just take a physique 360 because they know that like they feel guilty, you know?
Yeah. And I say to people, like, when they start working with me, I'm like, look, take a progress picture. You don't have to upload it because they're likely, I mean, 9 times out of 10, they end up uploading it in the future anyway, because they see the result and they go, oh shit, actually, like, this is crazy, the difference. They actually want to show how they looked before. But I'm like, look, take a picture. Don't upload it. Don't even look at it yourself. Get your partner to take a picture, like get your wife, whatever, and get them to keep it, because you're going to regret not taking that picture when it comes to the future. Yeah. Or if you haven't taken that picture, you're not even going to realize the progress that you've made, and you're still going to feel demotivated, even though I can give you so many other indications and factors, and, you know, I can give you so much social proof that you have gained progress. But until you see that picture, if you've not got that first picture, you've got nothing to compare your future self to either.
Yeah, that's why I tell all clients, like, you don't even have to look at the video. Literally just send it in WhatsApp.
Yeah.
I'll look at it.